Given the opportunity to deliver one of these iconic Saturday monologues, I was actually delighted, almost salivating yesterday to see a story broken in the Telegraph that ministers had a chilling secret unit during COVID to curb lockdown dissent. They apparently flagged perfectly legitimate online conversations about vaccine passports and so on, and what have been proven to be well-founded fears about government policy. They were scrutinising for signs of sedition. This was a cause dear to my heart. The timing seemed almost too good to be true. Well, that story may well stand up, but it's not what I'm going to talk about this afternoon. Instead, I wanted to talk about things that seem too good to be true. Many years ago, possibly inspired by a desire to understand my recent decision to get married and have children, I picked up a book called Irrationality by Stuart Sutherland. This was one of the first of a wave of such titles which have since become a tsunami, a genre often referred to as popular psychology. You'll find these books on the table called Smart Thinking in Waterstones or in your local bookshop, and very tempting they are too. I was for many years borderline addicted. Most of them have been published in the last 20 years, suggesting enormous progress in human understanding in that period. Occasionally, an old pretender like Darwin, Plato or William James will find its way onto that table and then be ushered back out like a shabby, bearded tramp, gate-crashing a Silicon Valley product launch, who later turns out to have been the founder. Sutherland's book introduced me to various flaws, glitches, biases and errors in our thinking that limit the extent to which our brains guide us smoothly through the assault course of life. The rhymer's reason effect, beloved of advertisers. Survivorship bias, beloved of chat shows. The availability heuristic. There is a long list of cognitive biases now on Wikipedia, and fascinating it is too. Indeed, more recent books now with titles like Twitch, What That Annoying Thing in Your Eyelid Is Trying to Tell You, or Spleen, Why Nature's Forgotten Organ Could Hold the Secret to Your Self-Destructive Behaviour, suggest that your brain is barely in charge at all, a figurehead at best, and every bit as apt to stumble up the steps of life as is President Joe Biden. Your gut, for instance, is now thought to be as intelligent as a sheepdog and as desperate to attract your attention as well, and for you to entertain it. One that immediately struck me as describing a very real thing, however, is called confirmation bias. And it is now widely understood to be among the most powerful distortions affecting and hindering our grasp of the modern world. It's why we end up in those notorious echo chambers we hear about, or rather, why everyone else does while we alone roam free. Confirmation bias means that even if we don't actively seek evidence that what we already think is correct, that sort of evidence is all that has a chance of penetrating our thick blocks of wood, our exoskeletons of doubt. Anything that doesn't work with the grain of our pre-existing beliefs has very little chance of getting through. We don't even feel consciously hostile to it. Very often, contrary facts just make us feel tired. Thinking is tiring. It uses a surprisingly large amount of oxygen. The brain is a thirsty organ, I know mine is, and it burns large amounts of calories. Adjusting established beliefs in the face of new evidence sounds like a good habit to adopt, but then so did that gym membership last January, and so did starting every day with a cold shower. We have instead evolved various heuristics in the modern parlance, shortcuts essentially, that allow us to sex the newborn chicks of discourse and sort them very quickly into battery or bin. Does this, we ask ourselves, firstly, feel right? As Thomas Gilovich put it, for desired conclusions, we ask ourselves, can I believe this? But for unpalatable conclusions, we must ask, must I believe this? A couple of weeks ago, word went around that John Cleese, now a friend of this very channel, of course, but once upon a time, way back in my youth, a python, the very highest form of comedy life. John was going to remake Life of Brian as a stage show. Good news. But it was reported he was going to bow to shifts in popular taste and loss of appetite for cruelty and humour, and remove the famous scene in which his character, Reg, leader of the People's Front of Judea, derides as delusional the determination of his comrade Stan, played by Eric Idle, to be known as Loretta and to have a baby. Where, he wants to know, is the fetus going to gestate? In a box? Well, that now sounds transphobic, of course, and so there was a protest. Did this feel true to me? It did. Could I believe it? Oh yes. In a world where barely a day goes by without trans activists committing some fresh outrage against common sense, I certainly could. Not only could I believe it, I wrote a perfectly serviceable column about it for Spiked Online. Trans, I wrote, is the new church, and mockery of it the new blasphemy. My tone was elegiac, more disappointed than angry, lamenting the passing of the great British sense of humour and the ridiculous, the body to be cremated and the ashes to be sent God knows where, certainly not Australia. Only trouble was, it wasn't true, of course. Cleese had taken a straw poll of reactions to that scene at the end of the read-through, and that much was true, but he was not himself a straw in that wind. He was amused to see that it made some of his actors uncomfortable, but he was standing firm, and the scene was staying in. Well, it would be tempting at this point to say, "My wider point still stands," something I have nicknamed the pie deflection, after Jonathan Pie, the parody news presenter who was similarly gulled into thinking the worst of Rishi Sunak recently and refused to take the hit. "The fact that I could believe this tells us something in itself," he said. Yes, what it tells us is that we, all of us are fallible, Jonathan, even me, and all vulnerable to wishful thinking. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The price of self-respect, too. "All lies and jest," sang my namesake, Paul Simon, nearly 60 years ago. Still a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. But the best we can hope to do is be aware that our gut, too, can be terribly mistaken.